Whoops. Okay. I think maybe the microphone's on now. Can y'all hear me? Somebody comment. Um, okay. All right. So everyone can hear me good. I was talking there for a few seconds and it was just radio silence on my part. That's what happens when I set this up myself. All right. Good deal. Yeah. So it's been insane. Not too bad though. We had about almost 6 days without power, and I was planning on doing a live chat yesterday evening, but we just didn't know when we were going to get it back. We ended up getting it this morning at about 9:30 a.m. and it's been a pretty interesting bit. It definitely was hard on the little colonies that were were weak. That's why we try not to run very many little ones through winter. But the big colonies, I looked into them, they seem pretty good. I think there was a slight bit of it retarded the colonies a little bit because they were wanting to start rearing brood, and this just a whole week of really harsh weather it just set them back a little bit. But all of the pollen and everything else was set back as well. So I'm not sure it's necessarily really bad. Hey, everybody, small Canadian beekeeper. All right, got people from Utah all over the place, Idaho. Hope you guys are doing good. Thanks. It was about 55 degrees today. We got rid of most of the snow and, of course, filmed that video today. And I just kind of threw that together for better or for worse. We're just kind of waiting for things to kind of pick up. Typically at this point, we're in a good spot. Brian, dude, ask a question to go with these or something. You're really making me feel bad in a good way. Appreciate you, man. I really do. I tell you, I'm so excited. Part of the reason, typically at this point, I'm just like not in any rush to get into beekeeping. But this year, it seems like I've kind of got that energy. We've actually this is probably the first year in 3 or 4 years we've actually taken a little bit of time off, besides the conference, where we didn't do any bees at all. I wasn't driving a truck on to compound that, making up for some of those days I wasn't working bees. And we kind of got a reset. Then on top of that, I'm super excited about this experimental yard and a lot of other things we're going to be trying. I feel like I'm almost to that hobby. I've got that hobby level excitement again. And a lot of that's because I'm able to try new things and learn more stuff. So maybe that's weird sounding, but I really haven't been this excited to do for a bee year to get started in many years. Beekeeping boomer. My yard won't look like yours until the end of April. You must be quite a bit north of Tennessee. GA. All right. Yeah. Thanks again, Brian Reese. I'm telling you what, man, we're just going to probably have to stick you up as a sponsor for this test yard. But if you have any questions or anything you'd like to help on this chat, man, hit me with them. Seriously, like no one's asked a question yet. So I'm going to just keep rambling. No, seriously. So I actually talked to Frederick Dunn the other day. I wanted to talk to him. We chatted back and forth on Facebook Messenger, and he's planning on coming out to our next conference, which is January 7th and 8th. We haven't opened registration for that yet, but it will be happening. And then we're planning on doing another one in 2022 that's more for beginner beekeepers, where the conference in January, the first one, that's always centered towards intermediate going towards advanced information. And it's just, if you're brand new though, it's a lot, we weren't really talking about brand new stuff. So we're going to have a smaller conference for that. And Frederick Dunn is just such a good guy. And also I think he would just be wonderful. Then I asked him if he'd be willing to do that. And I think that if nothing changes, he'll be one of our speakers at that conference for new beekeepers to intermediate level. And I think it'll be awesome. When is a good time for pollen patties on the hive? So, hey, Bee Lord, how I like to do it, I've tried it prior to pollen flows, and I haven't seen really myself any big benefits. Timing it either right before the pollen hits or doing it right when it starts, I personally think is the best time to start throwing the patties on, because they just don't really, Once the bees start committing to rearing brood, which really starts when that pollen comes in, they will just eat these patties like crazy. But if I can throw them on in January when they don't want to raise brood, and they'll consume them, chuck a little bit of it out, and you just don't see a whole lot of results. You don't see a lot of brood from that. I personally don't think it's worth my time or the money for the patties to throw it on any earlier than when the first pollens come in or just right before. Just my opinion. Hive blanket or insulated top. So I don't know if that's just like I have a preference on either one of those. I've never used a hive blanket. I have had insulated tops, and I do kind of like those. More and more as I've been using those double bubbles and or foamies, and also as I've been using some of those foam boards, I really like having those. And I don't use upper entrances in my hives, and that seems to work pretty good for me. But I do see some added benefit of having that nice insulated cover under the lid, even here in Tennessee. I really like that. I can't wait to experiment more with that. All right. When to start honey flow in Vancouver, Washington? Have no clue. No clue whatsoever. That's where the local guys will have to help you out with that. Man, I have no idea. I can tell you what it's like in Tennessee. My buddy in Memphis has a flow that's like 3 or 4 weeks before mine. And the guys up towards the Smokies are usually running 2 to 3, 4 weeks behind me. Do you think there's anything to burning the inside of the box? As far as helping the wood last longer as a protective thing, I don't think it does a whole lot. I think it's mostly for looks. Now, if you have some disease, certain types of disease, it can really help. If you have American foul brood, which is just incredibly tenacious, I mean, it only takes, I think, 30 something spores to contaminate a colony. So, it's easy to miss 30 something spores with a flamethrower. But I mean, just for general practices, I think it's great to clean some things out and do all that kind of stuff. Whoa, Kenneth Dutton, man, we really appreciate you and Brian helping us out tonight with the experimental yard. I'm telling you guys, and gals, I'm just so blown away and humbled. I say a lot of things, as you all know. My wife can attest to all the things that I say. Yeah, she's over here like it never ends, and we got a laurel giggle out of that. But when I talked about this experimental yard, I really thought it would be about 2 more years out, at least another year or two out. And we are doing it this year. It is hard to believe. And it's, due to you all. I mean, that's all there is to it. I couldn't do it by myself this quick for sure. And so as a team, we're going to make this happen. And I think we're going to really learn a lot. But yeah, getting back to burning the hives, I think it can be good. If especially if you don't know what's been in there before, just go ahead. It won't hurt it. I think it helps on anything but American foul brood. American foul brood, I wouldn't risk it. I just burn the thing to the ground. That's just my personal opinion. You think? Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Have you tried Global Pollen Patties? They have a patty with 15% real pollen in it. They use it super fast in early spring. I have not personally used them. I've had some people say that they'll eat them a little faster than Ultra B, and then I've heard some people say that you know, they're good patties, but they're still just a patty, and if the bees aren't ready to use them, then patties only do so much. Even with the real pollen in there, there's just a big difference between even bee bread and fresh pollen. Ian and I have been talking about this a lot, and there's just a lot of X factors that we don't know. But that fresh pollen, there's something special about that. And I've never tried those global patties out, but I've heard from some people they're pretty good. I can get a much better price on Ultra B, and that's why I'm using those. Ian is on. Uh-oh. Well, I kind of feel bad about picking on Ian so much. I think this last week has been God's way of telling me to lay off on Ian a little bit about his cold weather. because it has been pretty brutal here for us the last week. And I've just been like, maybe I've been a little hard on Ian. Poor guy. Oh, yeah. Kenneth, if you got anything, let me know on questions. So Ian asked him, do I think that those cloth hive domes are helping or hindering the colony? So Ian, obviously it's one hive and it's not even that big of one. I have it on top of another colony. So there's multiple factors, and there's another colony underneath it because it's got a double screen board that some of the heat's coming up. It's one of those things. Looking at it, I have watched it pretty at least every other week on average. A lot of times I'll sneak out there and just pop it as far as the lid and just look down and see what's going on. And there'll be a little beads of condensation, but I don't think at this point I can really say how beneficial or not beneficial it has been. I have not seen the bees have any condensation on them. They've always looked really dry. I just think for $19 or whatever it is now, that I mean, obviously you're not putting them on your hives, and I'm not doing it on a bunch of mine, but I don't know how good it really is. But I think it's safe to say that it's not bad, like really bad. I don't think you can justify $20 a hive for one of those things myself. But the bees look pretty good considering their size. I like it. Negative 35 for weeks up here. Sorry, Ian. Don't worry. You'll be where we're at in 3 months or whatever it is. Two and a half. Have you heard of commercial beekeepers using Grandivo? Thoughts? I don't even know what that is. Maybe somebody else can explain. Let's see. What would be the most important thing to think about going into spring the first time with overwintering bees? The most important thing with overwintering in any climate, whether you're up there in the cold far north where crazy people like Ian live, or whether you're in Hawaii where they don't really even get a winter, is how healthy the bees are. They've got to have a good queen, got to have a healthy cluster, low mite loads. They've got to have nutrition. I'm telling you, our healthy colonies, they do great. It's all about what they look like going into winter. As far as insulate, especially in places like Tennessee, insulation stuff, I've overwintered for years without any insulation. Holy hives even that had too much ventilation. That wasn't even on purpose. I was just lazy. Didn't care that much because they always done good before. It's always, to me, what condition do they go into winter? And then after that, the next most important thing is oxalic acid treatments when they're broodless, so I can lower the mite loads to as close to zero as possible. And then if I had a thing to pick after that, they have a healthy cluster, plenty of food, then I'm going to go with an insulated lid. And you don't have to have it in the lid, but just having like a foamy, like what Ian uses to kind of cut down on excess wind or anything getting in there and losing heat, or better yet, using some of those foam boards like I've used that have an R value of 5 or 10. That would be my next preferred thing to add in addition to going into winter. Again, we're very mild here in Tennessee, but good, healthy bees typically come out of winter looking good and healthy. It's sorry to not be more complicated or have any secret recipes, but that's what I've found. I missed somebody up here, and I apologize. David Long, thank you so much for your donation. We really do appreciate you, and I meant to say something. If you have a comment, please leave it, and thank you very much. It really helps. All right. Hey, P. Grace. Good to see you on here again. When you look for property to build your apiaries, what did you look for? Acreage, type of property, developed or not? Okay, so the most important function for me is something that's accessible. Being able to get my trucks in and out of, because especially like right now when we have all this mud, and we typically are very muddy in wintertime, and you know what I'm talking about because you're pretty close. You've got to be able to get your trucks in and out. And then you've also got to be able to, when you're pulling honey supers, they're pretty heavy. You don't want to be lugging those a long way if you're needing to move hives, and you'll always eventually get to a point where you have to move hives. And oh man, I hate moving bees. So, having something with easy access is the number one thing I look for. I'd like to have fairly early morning sun. That I think that's really helpful to get those bees out there, get them working if possible. It's not a deal breaker, but that definitely is one of the things that we do look for. I'd also, if I can get the trifecta, I want something that's fairly hard for people to be able to see from the road. Not that I've ever had any bees stolen from me, but it could happen at some point. And most, 99% of beekeepers that I've met are very honest people, but I just don't like to give anybody the opportunity for that 0.01% or whatever it is. And also, some people will just be rambunctious with hives. You get some teenagers that obviously didn't have parents that discipline them, and they're out pushing over cows, pushing over beehives, and shooting. I've seen buddies of mine have hives that have gotten shot. People just shooting them for the heck of it. So those are the kind of things I'm looking for. But access is number one. And definitely farmers. I love keeping bees on farmers' land because they understand pain. They understand variables a lot better. And, no offense to people who aren't farmers. It's just they're used to getting kicked by cows and weather conditions. And, if you accidentally rut up their field, we always make sure we go back and fix stuff up, but it's not like they're freaking out, just that kind of stuff. So that's typically how I go about all my bee yards. And so far, knock on wood, that's been really good. Talking to the fellows at the co-ops and playing cards with them and shooting the bull goes a long way at developing those kind of relationships. One of the smartest farmers that I ever met actually never learned how to read, and he's passed away now. But he was in the Great Depression era, and they didn't have the education system down here. It wasn't very good, very poor area, that Gainsborough back in the day. And but let me tell you, when it came to farming, that guy knew stuff. Sugar Shane, thank you so much for the $5 donation. -20. Oh my goodness! I definitely had the big coat on last week here in Minnesota. We really appreciate you. And hey, this American flag is super important to me and my family. It's super important to a lot of people. I think more people than what some people realize. Mary A., thank you so much, Mary, for your significant donation, and we appreciate you. I'm tempted to buy some bee weaver queens. I'm not sure I have enough experience to raise my own queens this year. Do you think they are particularly defensive bees? I think you have said they were. In my experience, they were, and I know multiple other people who have had that same experience. I have had some people who have said they're not that bad. You got to realize, though, some people suit up all the time. And one of the fellas that told me that they're not that bad, he suits up, gloves and all, every time. I don't beekeep like that all the time. And so what might be considered gentle to him. And also, they raise so many queens. So out of 100 queens, they might only have 10 of them that are fairly aggressive. I don't know. But Weavers has a pretty good reputation for more than average aggression. So if you go that route, just kind of be prepared. But then again, maybe your experience will be totally different than mine. It's been 8 years, I think, since I've had some weavers. But some of the best photos I have of my friend Norman Fowler out of Taft, Tennessee, is after he purchased, I think, 30 of them. And him and his son couldn't get within about 200 yards of those hives. They were very special bees. And he sent me so many pictures of their eyes swollen shut. Poor fella. His son, I don't think, will ever keep bees now. But thank you so much for your donation. And it's hard buying queens, but we need more local clubs raising queen cells. Find a couple, encourage a couple of people, even if you can't do it yourself. That's why we got to get more young people involved. If you haven't watched Beekeeping Like a Girl or Darian Sharp's channel, Young Beekeepers, we need these young people and getting into bee clubs and raising cells and queens and getting that local stuff. I'd love to see more of that. We're going to see more. Things are changing. Brad, thank you so much as well for your donation. If you have any questions, man, leave it below. Thank you. All right. So you moved to this state. Hey, Tennessee is a great state. People are moving in left and right. It's an awesome place to be, especially right now. I checked on my hives this morning and got covered in bee poo. How do I get the hood of this suit to wash it? So what I do with my Ultra Breeze, and Laurel has a ventilated Man Lake one. Of the two of them, the Ultra Breeze is made in the USA, and you can definitely tell that it's tougher. It's a little bit more money, but it's better quality. But we take those hooded veils off the top, or whatever type of veil, unzip those, take those off. We'll have a tub like you can get from a dollar store, and then we'll put some soapy water in there and we'll just kind of rub it around in there. The veils are very sensitive. The bee suits we toss into the washer, and make sure you follow the instructions on those because you don't want to mess those up. Typically, we wash them in our washer, and then we hang dry out in the sun or above a wood stove or something like that. But bee poo, I'm telling you, certain times, especially right after a good pollen flow, they get shut up for about 3 or 4 days early in this time of the year, and they just come out there and let her fly, especially up north. Michael Palmer has some pictures of snow, and I mean, you want to talk about yellow snow, man. He's got some crazy pictures of Vermont bees taking big old dumps up there. Hey, Bruce's bees, how are you doing? Get that wax dipping done? Do you have any top bar hives? No, I don't, but I do have a long Langstroth, and I'm pretty excited about that. All right, Noah Gaynor, 16-year-old son, helping with the bees. That's awesome. I started when I was just after 15, and if I'd have had my dad involved, and my dad was involved in a lot of things. Bees was just not an area he was going to be involved. That's where he drew the line as a parent. But he'll learn a whole lot faster than I did, I'm sure, if he sticks with it. Yeah, so Bruce's bee says that he's trying some bee weaver queens for the first time, and so far they are a bit feisty, but not unworkable. And I think again, it's going to depend on people's experiences, and again, if you're fully suited up and wearing gloves and stuff, then you'll probably be just fine. So some people, it's all just a matter of preference. Let's see. Hey, thanks, Nicholas. A lot of people commenting on bee weavers, and again, this is not the only source of information. I consider myself a messenger boy. I know a thing or two, but there's a lot of areas that I can point you of things that I don't know, or people that know better than me. So, anyways. Hey, Merry Christmas 2.0. Best way to stop mass swarming. Weaver is near me. I've heard before that they keep their bees down in South Texas, Africanized bees, or down there. Okay, so robbing is one of my least favorite things in beekeeping. Varroa mites being number one. Number two being robbing. I'm pretty sure this is in the right order. And number three would be wiring in wax foundation. Oh, man. And painting beehives, all those things. But robbing, man, it's my least favorite trait. And Italian bees, in my opinion, are worse about this. All bees will rob, especially if there's a dearth on, they're going to do it. And down in Texas, if it's anything like Tennessee, you've got some dearth periods. The best thing that I do for it is whenever I split my bees, I have the splits in a totally different yard away from my big ones. It really helps out. It doesn't get rid of all of it. Also, I prefer to feed right before dusk. If I've got to feed sugar syrup, do it right before dusk. That way you don't do it early. Now, it's not always easy to fit that in your schedule. Of course, try not to spill it, but instead of doing it early in the morning and maybe inciting that, then I do it at dusk. I find that carnies are a little bit better about it than Italians. Maybe that's just because they lower their population quicker. Of course, Italians do seem to be hungry all the time, so that might have something to do with it. But, I don't really have any super secret ways of preventing it other than just prevention. But definitely, I think carnies are a little bit better about it. Now, if you've got someone that close to your bee yards with a lot of bees, that is a rough situation to be in. And I've never experienced that before. But yeah, feeding late at night would be my biggest recommendation if it's happened during feeding. What are you looking for in the hive weather-wise to start grafting queens? And this is from B Lord in Poland. So what I want to see is drones being developed. I want to see them in the purple-eyed stage, and also I want to see drones already. I'm not one of those people that really pushes the season, because when you push the very beginning of the season here, which typically is I can start grafting the 3rd or the 4th week of March, and I'll have the drones. That's not an issue. I always have the drones in the 3rd or 4th week of March, but the weather could be highs in the 70s and 80s. It could be highs in the 40s for a week or so. And so I don't know what I'm going to get. It really comes down to the mating flights. And so if I get good weather, I can get really good acceptance. Shoot, I might get 80, 95% of my queens to come back. If I get the cool weather that early on, I might end up with 40% to come back. So I typically like to see some fairly decent flying weather for queens. Averages around 60 degrees Fahrenheit is really good, if possible. But if you need to push the season because you're in Poland and you don't have a very long season, then and you feel like you're comfortable doing that, then the main thing is I need to see drones out there and in the colony, and I want to see plenty of them. Whenever the bees want to start swarming, that's a great time to raise queens. Typically, the bees nutritionally feel like they can do that. Swarming is always a good thing to follow raising queens as well. So Dan Schneider says, I got 25 pounds of wax with wire coming. What do you mean you don't like wax? Hey, Dan, I like the wax works. The bees will draw it and all that kind of stuff. I do not enjoy wiring thousands of frames of wax foundation. I don't enjoy that. I mean, it just takes so much time. And especially back when I was starting into beekeeping, I didn't have an electric embedder. If you have one of those, it makes it so much nicer. But of course, with plastic foundation, I can just bend it a little bit, pop it in, and goodness, I can even get the plastic foundation without any wax at all and use my own beeswax on it. So that's what I've been doing, but that's just something personally that I don't enjoy that at all. I really respect the people who do that because I mean it's definitely a lot of dedication. Say what, Laurel? Oh, of course you should. Everyone loves to see the smart one and the better looking. I'm just thinking, what do I have going for me besides my ability to talk? If you had that, I'd have nothing. It's true, man. Come on, you don't have to say it. All right. So, do you use oxalic acid vapor when honey supers are on? No, I don't. And just because one, it's not legal, but it's not even just for that because I don't find it necessary. I do 2 rounds in the winter when they're broodless, and then I pull my honey supers in June when the honey flow is done. And as soon as I pull them off, it's time to treat. We try to run that as a well-oiled machine. So yeah, B Lord, the temperature I'm looking for is about 60 degrees Fahrenheit on average, if possible. You can, I like to see that as an average temperature for mating flights on the low end. But it can be hard. Spring is just up and down, up and down. John Hatcher, are you going to do any more farming videos? And I've got some videos actually, John, to upload to that channel, and I just have not got around to it. I apologize. Sometimes I'm a little too ambitious for my own good. I've taken on so much. When I started that, I didn't plan on doing a beekeeping conference. I definitely didn't plan on. I didn't think we were going to be able to do this experimental yard so fast, and man, it is moving quickly. I just can't wait till we get into March a little bit and we start setting up the yard and everything. Whew, man, I'm excited. And there's a couple things I've been doing that we're going to do in the experimental yard that I've recommended, and they've been working good for me, but I don't really have any data to prove that. So I'm excited to see what that's gonna yield. And I've got a buddy of mine who's really good with data, that's going to help me with this to try to make sure this is as thorough and as easy to understand and also be meaningful as people get stuff from it. All right. This guy, I enjoy taking plastic frames out of the box from UPS, just handed to me and putting them straight into a super. Haha. I know. And see, that's the thing. We're constantly, I mean, we are just running out of time all the time. I remember saying, and Laurel has so many of these, it's embarrassing. It's constant. I thought you said you were never going to do that. Why can't women just let it go? I mean, their husbands are allowed to be wrong once or 5,000 times. And I remember saying that I would never why in the world would I buy a pre-assembled frame with foundation already inserted? You must be crazy to pay somebody to do that kind of work for you. Save the money. I tell you, there's few things I love more than just having a truckload. Laurel's like, yeah, just make me do it. That's what you did. Well, I've learned, honey. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Now, can you quit bringing it up? Bless your heart. Are you going to post conference stuff on YouTube? If we get around to editing it, we will. Our camera didn't get the best videos. It's just, sound wise, that's the main thing. The video's not too bad. There's gonna have to be a lot of video editing work. And right now we're building a website. I'm epoxying my floor for the extraction room. I say we, Laurel and I, and it was supposed to be done this week, and then we've been out of power for 6 days, and just one thing after the other. So I'm going to try to get some of those up at some point. But definitely January 7th and 8th, Bob Benny, Ian Stepler, Rick Sutton, who's a professional beekeeper, who seems to be a really awesome guy. I talk to these people in person, so we don't get any crazy people. But it's going to be a blast. And we're going to have Frederick Dunn there and Randy McCaffrey as well. So it is going to be nothing if not fun. All right, you ready? Can you do this? I don't know how you're so shy. Okay, let's see. Where are we at? Kamon, do you try to requeen every year, Christopher Palmer? And, I've been doing this 17. This is my 17th season, or is this 18? It's one of those. It doesn't really matter. But I've tried a bunch of different things out, and I find the most productive colonies consistently are the ones that had a queen made the year before. So basically, the queens that I made in 2020, in June, July, August, or May, those are going to be my champs honey crop wise in 2021. And it's not that I don't get some good production out of the ones from 2019, but it's very low. I mean, they build up colonies, but they don't reach their potential that they did the year before. So if you're wanting production, if you're wanting consistency, if you're wanting less queen problems, then you take that a little bit out of the equation by requeening. Doesn't necessarily mean you go in there and kill them. I think it's a great practice to go into these colonies that are, a year old or so, and you're thinking, man, go ahead and get these things requeened. Use those double screen boards, put that queen below, double screen board, second deep or whatever on top, drop a queen cell up there, get your new queen to come in. If it doesn't work out, combine them back. If it does, you've got a brand new queen up top, old one below, make a little nuke off with the old queen. Now your production colony's got a nice, brand new, fresh queen, and you can let that other queen build up that nuke and hopefully do something with it. And if you want to requeen it later, if you need to, that's fine. But it's not all just going in there and crushing queens even before they've maxed out their time. But definitely there's a reason why professionals requeen fairly often, because outside of Varroa, queen issues are my second biggest reason for losing colonies. Have you had your wood stove going to keep you warm over the last 6 powerless days? Yeah, Ian, I'm telling you what, man, I love wood stoves. Being born in Indiana and my grandpa having a Fisher American-made wood stove. I mean, these things are like as heavy as a Sherman tank, and they're built like one. And I got the one I have down the basement for a really good price. And my brother Laurel and I could hardly pick the thing up. And we're pretty stout, um, muscle wise, anyways. So, yeah, I've been running that thing hard, and it's been actually kind of fun. We've cooked on it a bunch. Laurel's boiled water for coffee on there. So, we were born for this kind of stuff. We weren't miserable the last 6 days. It just kind of set us back a little bit on some of the work what we need electricity for. We're pretty awesome. You are, anyways. Um, yeah, we like that kind of stuff. We're not going off grid though. Nice to see your queen. Absolutely. All hail the queen. Turn the camera on Laurel, camera hog. She's the one that will hop in here. Hawaii surfing video. I actually did some body surfing. I didn't have a surfboard though, and it was a blast. I can actually hear the whales when I dove down to snorkel. I could hear the whales talking to one another, and if I didn't know what that sound was, I would have come out of the water like a cartoon and shot up 20 foot in the air and started going towards shore, because I'm not used to diving and hearing things talking to each other underwater. Let's see. Chipmunks, huh? Yeah, someone said I waited to push the thumbs up button until Laurel got on camera. I get that a lot. Laurel, you're gonna have to come on more often. Yeah, so Ricky Rorick, the guy that commented earlier, he is the guy that made my long Langstroth hive or horizontal hive. And I'm really excited to do videos on that because there's a lot of folks out there who either want to buy one of those or even build one. And maybe you have back problems and you still get the advantages of the removable frames. Top bars can work too, but I really like frames, especially for brand new beginners. I think frames are just the way to go. Hey, Don, welcome aboard. You play the mandolin and surf. I do a lot more than that, Ian, but when you're homeschooled, your parents really, you got to find something to do because obviously you're not socializing. I have social problems because I'm a homeschooler. That's what they told me I'd have. I remember when the homeschool wave happened in like the 80s and 90s, and everyone's like, oh my goodness, these homeschoolers, they're not going to be able to socialize because, they're not going to public school. And I'm really suffering from those years of not being allowed to hang around people my own age. That's why I hung around people. That's why I ended up hanging around people that were like 2 or 3 times my age. And I could actually learn something that didn't have something to do with some stupid person out of Hollywood or pop song. Man, I really am not good at being 30, am I? I can't even say these terms right. I'm so not hip. 32, whatever. Hey, Sugar Shane, thank you very much. If you have a question, certainly leave one. And thank you so much for the donation. Let's see. Good morning from Germany. Well, goodness, it must be early there. Kamon sent you a question on Facebook the other day. If you get a chance, can you answer it? Thanks. I haven't seen that, Gordon. And just keep in mind, everybody, it's never personal. There's nothing I love more than talking bees and answering questions and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure Ian can attest to this as well. I literally get dozens and dozens, especially this time every day of the year. And Facebook Messenger, Tennessee's Bees, my personal page on Facebook, YouTube questions, email questions, and especially the ones that pertain to something that I've already addressed in a video, I typically don't get around to answering. I mean, it's gotten to the point where I have no time for my kids if I answer them all. So please don't take it personal. There's a lot of them I just don't see. But if I do come across it, and I have the time, I totally will answer it. This is a good spot for it. That's what this whole thing is about. And if I miss any here, it's definitely not on purpose. Do you recommend any propane vaporizers, Pecos Bill? I've never used one of those. There's a lot of information out there on oxalic acid, but not enough in the propane department. Are they getting too hot? Is it degrading the oxalic acid because it's getting too high in temperature? I don't know. I've never used one. I would love to know the answer to that question, because if I did, I would probably be using one. I need speed as much as possible, but I really don't know. Hey, faithful. Man, this thing just jumped on me. Faithful from birth. Hey, thank you for listening to these videos. I'm glad you're excited about it. All right. So, Cayman, did you have to promise Laurel another trip to Hawaii to get her in front of the camera tonight? No, I didn't have to do that. You know, she just decided tonight was going to be the night. It takes her a few months to get the courage to do these kind of things. Ow. See, Don, you're getting me in trouble. I managed to do pretty good all by myself. Do I have to put the frames on the freezer after my hives died in winter? I am in Kentucky. It really depends. Obviously, if it's really cold, I would go in there and check them, see if there's any damage to them. But a lot of times, if bees die in winter, the conditions that are in winter keep them safe from wax moths and small hive beetles until it gets more mild. Now, mice is what I would be concerned about. They'll get up in there and make a nest in there and pee all over everything. It's really aggravating. But it is best to stick them in the freezer if you have the space. It'll definitely protect them very good. And but especially if there's bee bread or honey in there, they need to be protected. Freezer's a good spot to stick them. I have a gas vaporizer. I have not had a chance to test it out. Who would win an MMA fight, me or Ian? Well, Canadians are too nice. And so, but I say typically I'd win over a large percentage of Canadians just because they're so nice. But Ian is not a nice Canadian. He's rude, crude, and he's a farmer. And so I think he's awesome. I would be scared to go against Ian because farmers, yeah, Ian, it doesn't matter that Ian's taller than me. I can go for the low blow. But just farmers, he's tough. He's used to dealing with those cold weather. So, I mean, I probably would get bludgeoned. He'd feel it though the next day. Let me tell you, he'd feel it. Hey, Christopher Palmer, thank you so much for the donation. Now that the boss is on the experimental yard, we'll get financed. Thanks for all of both of you do. Hey, Christopher, I really appreciate you. And our number one goal with YouTube this year is that experimental yard. Once that starts up, we are going to be just putting so much time into it. And I'm excited. I really appreciate you guys. So Don said, well, no, I told her one day we would go to Hawaii again, Don. I didn't say when. I left it open-ended. So, it was 10 years after we got married this time. So, 20 years, 10 more years, 20th anniversary or before. Tell Ian Carrie needs a raise to breed for brilliance. Yeah, I tell you, man, she does a great job for Ian. When you get somebody like that works so hard, you definitely want to. You got to keep those people. If I ever hire an employee, I'd like somebody who's that passionate about raising queens. Let's see here. I know I've missed some questions. I apologize. Hey, Kamon, is it too early in the year to add drawn comb and 2 brood box into my hive? Lost a hive this year and wondering if I can add their comb and resources to another one of my hives this soon. Only if they need the space. Bees really thrive in tight spaces. You don't want them to get to the swarming period. So if you have a 10 frame box of bees and they're occupying solid 8 of those frames, and there's a good bit of brood in there, so they're fixing to occupy more space, throw that box on there. But if they're not really ready to expand past that 10 frame box, I would wait. Even if it's just, maybe they'll need it in 2 weeks from now or 3, whatever it is. you don't really want to mess with those thermal dynamics, especially in those key times in spring. This is where I think insulated hives and an insulated lid really come into handy because people talk about what are the insulated hives doing in December and January. They're really not doing much. There's like no brood. And so the bees are just heating up the core, and the clusters like this big with the carnies, and the boxes are this big. They're not heating up that whole hive, and so that insulation's not really doing a whole lot for them, especially in a mild area in Tennessee. Might mean more to the bees up in an area where you're getting -20, and it probably does. But I think where we're going to see the big differences, if any, for myself, is those key times in spring where we don't want to mess up those thermodynamics where they're needing that extra warmth because they're really trying to expand that brood nest and raise a lot of brood. And if they can turn that brood around, they're just off to the races for that big honey crop. But if that cold snap hits them and cuts them back, then they can lose a lot of momentum. And that's where an insulated hive or not having too much space above them too quickly can really play into their advantage. So as beekeepers, we need to be mindful of adding space. Last year, I added honey supers when I normally add them. Last year was kind of like this year. It was way too cool for what we typically have. And I put my honey supers on, but it warmed up in late March. We were building up towards a nice start to the flow in early April, where we get some of the autumn olive and a few other things going, the fringe facilia and other stuff coming in. And it was like 70s and even some 80-degree days. And so I threw on some honey supers. We got a crazy cold snap, froze a bunch of things up, low 20s, multiple days. I was seeing European foul brood in colonies. I was not seeing hardly anything at all in them. It just stressed them out so much. And all that space that I added on top, that heat was just going away from them. And maybe had I added less or none at all, it would have been easier for them during that period. Typically, I do that without any issues. So we need to be mindful of the weather and adding space to our bees. Let's see. I'm way behind on questions. When do I start splitting hives? Oh, late March if it's a normal year. What is a normal year though? I'd say we're almost 10 to 14 days. We're probably 14 days behind right now of where we would be in what I would consider a halfway normal year. It's just been colder. But I think a lot of the plants are about 10 to 14 days behind too. So I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. But typically, I'd expect to start making some splits late March, early April. And, in a mild year, I might split some bees literally the second week of March. The earliest I've split bees is the first day of March. And we're definitely not doing that this year. Hey, Dan, I'm sorry to hear that about that down there in Texas. It was really hard on our little colonies as well. The ones that were really like, are they going to make it? Which we didn't have a lot of them, but we did have a few, and they died. And then we had several that were just small and trying to kind of get a little brood, and they really got cut back a little bit. So I hate to hear that for you. We are working on trying to raise a lot of queens this year, and we're working on a website. And so we're hoping that's going to make it a lot easier for people to be able to order queens when we have them available. But we're not taking any orders for that right now. So someone says that you have a talent for talking. I stutter. You're smoothly talking, no awkward moments, no silent pauses. It's a real talent. Thanks. You're doing awesome. Well, I make a lot of mistakes, and let me tell you, I practice a lot and I mess up a lot. I have to actually eat a certain way in order to be able to talk this coherent. Seriously, it's the truth. Blood sugar and all that stuff. But I appreciate you saying that. It really helps me out. There's several times that I kind of feel like I stink. And I was talking to Natalie, Beekeeping Like a Girl, and she's fixing to turn 13. She's awesome. She's got a YouTube channel. If you don't watch it, you ought to go over there and support a really fine young beekeeper. I'm excited to see what she does. in the next several years and what she's doing this year. And, we're always our worst critic, it seems. And she has those things running through her mind. I'm just like, you're doing great. And I think a lot of times we're our own worst enemy. But I really do appreciate you all so much. When I first started this YouTube channel, there were several times I really considered hanging it up because I didn't, but honestly, it was a few people, kind comments that kept me doing it. And Laurel telling me I had to. That made a difference. Hey, Clayton Leftwich, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you very much. And the cool thing is, all these donations are going right back into more information. I'm going to try, if I can, to do some collaborations with Dr. Humberto Boncristiani and see if I can maybe get him up here to help me with some stuff. Either that or another PhD who I'm talking with right now. And so I can learn a little bit more about data gathering. So I'm excited about that. What's the latest you're willing to treat for mites before spring? Okay, so Pecos Bill, let me go over my strategy on treatment really quick. So I treat in June after I pull my honey supers. I treat in August before the fall flow starts really good. And that's important because we want those bees really healthy, mite counts low. We don't want any percentages of infection of viruses or mites inhibiting the development of winter bees. So we get bigger clusters going into winter, and bigger clusters are more productive and overwinter really good. And then I treat those winter clusters with 2 rounds of oxalic acid vapor in winter as well. And I use a rotation I've used Apivar, Thymol, mixing those two up between the June and August treatments, and oxalic acid vapor and timed brood breaks as well on certain splits. I really don't treat a lot before my honey flows. That's just how I'm currently doing it. And that seems to work really good for me. But for some people like Ian, he's got a totally different system than I do. And if you need to treat before the honey flow or even during the honey flow, you need to do it. Just pull those supers off, do whatever you have to, because once the mites and viruses get at certain levels, it doesn't hardly matter what your treatment is. They have a really hard time coming back from that. But I typically don't treat a lot before spring, but whatever you are treating with before spring, just make sure you follow the label, and that should work. All right, I missed something. Have you started the crane yet? Wish I was in your area. Calgary still has 2 feet of snow. I wish we could swap for a couple days. I would love to get a chance to go snow skiing this year, but I just have not been able to make that trip happen. But I understand negative 35 is stupid cold, crazy cold. Oh my goodness. But I don't have a crane. That was a buddy of mine's. I have a Hive lifter. I have not got around to even using it once since I got it in late December, but I'm going to get around to it. I've got to get that stuff done. I got my taxes done. I got my taxes done before March. I mean, somebody needs to get me pizza or at least something. Then this is a special moment in my life. All right. Hey, Mike. Thanks for your $5 donation so much. What is your view on feeding high fructose corn syrup as a cheaper alternative to ProSweet? Heard it can cause gut problems in bees. Thanks. All right. One of my best friends feeds high fructose corn syrup, and he's pretty darn successful every year. It's definitely not a preferred feed. He knows that. He lives near Cargill, and he can get that stuff for like 20 odd cents a pound. Super cheap. So he thinks it's worth it to him. I've never fed high fructose corn syrup to my bees in a straight form. ProSweet does have a little bit of high fructose corn syrup in it. It's a small percentage, but it's in there to help, I think, keep it from crystallizing and also to help give it some more balance on making it more similar to nectar and more stimulating. But it's been proven that high fructose corn syrup is not as good for bees as cane or beet sugar syrup. So just keep that in mind. I'm not one of those guys that's going to say do it. I'm not going to say don't do it, all that kind of stuff. You just got to decide kind of what your goals are and that kind of stuff. My buddy in Memphis, I'm telling you, he's very consistent, produces good honey. His bees are healthy, does a really good job, and he definitely manages bees totally different than I do, and in several ways. But he's very successful, and his bees are healthy and thriving year after year. And he doesn't buy bees every year. He raises his own queens, splits his own bees, and he makes it work using only high fructose corn syrup as feed. Um, So there you have it. Pro Sweet is better, but it could be a lot more expensive for you. Hey, thanks, Christopher Palmer. I appreciate that. Bob Benny, Ian, I try to be almost as good as those guys when I can be. Those guys are really on another level. But I'm excited about the future. I'm so excited. There's so many people collaborating, and it's not just guys like Ian and Bob, but there's such a trickle down effect from their level of information that affects sideliners and smaller professionals and hobby beekeepers, and it just takes us all up to the next level. And so we're not thinking at a low level, we're thinking at a high one, and then where it's pushing the envelope, it's going to create more products, it's going to create more bees eventually over time that are alive, more sustainability. I have never been this excited for beekeepers, and I think it's just going to continue to get better. Kamon, at what point did you transition over to pallets? And to follow up, what size pallets are you using? See, this is where, again, I mean, YouTube can, and if it's good information, can be super helpful. Ian is a really nice guy, even for a Canadian, and he has two-way pallets, right? And I don't think he invented those. I'm pretty sure he didn't, but he taught us about them. The majority of us, because without his videos, there might be tens of thousands of people who just still didn't know that people were using those things. And also he taught me and through his videos about those rims. And there's been commercial beekeepers that I know now that have been doing that for decades, but I might still not know about those things. I love the two-way pallet system. You don't have to have a fancy lifter like Ian has to still make them work. They're just easier to move around. 4-ways, if you have a forklift, 4-ways make a lot of sense. If you're trucking bees across the country, 4-ways make a whole lot more sense, but I don't want to do that. That's not my plans and my agendas. But the two-way pallets, they're basically a 4-way cut in half. They're 33 and a quarter inches wide, if I remember. I am planning on actually doing a video soon. I was hoping to have it done by now, but we lost power on exactly how I make my two-way pallets. And it's very similar, I'm sure, to what Ian is doing. But yeah, I love those two-way pallets, man. Gas and match for mite treatment. No. That didn't work, unfortunately. Had a buddy of mine try it. No. Laurel's giving me the look. Man, you're getting me in trouble. Hey, your flag looks much better than Ian's. Ian, there's fighting words, as we would say here in Tennessee, towards the mountains. Laurel says, you don't get to say that. You don't have the accent for it. See, you don't get to hear these little one-liners and bits, she tells me. Oh, that's how you say it. She looked at me. Them's fighting words. She's like, you still didn't do it right. Man. Can't get no satisfaction. Hey, I can't pronounce your name, but TIF1, do you do much equalizing of hive strength in early spring? And if so, what do you look for as a baseline to add or still bees and or brood? Okay, first of all, in order to be able to do this, you got to understand your season, when your flows start and stop. And also there's, like you've mentioned, there's variables between colony strengths. And there's some colonies, man, they're just so strong. You're like, what in the world is this queen doing? I just think they come out of winter with such a healthy, big winter population. They're ahead of the game. The queen's just extremely fertile and well mated. And obviously the mite counts are low and there's no disease problems. So what I'm looking for in my season is I'm going to start seeing heavy swarming by April 1st, and in a mild year, March. And so if the colony even looks like it could be swarming in the next couple weeks and the flow's not for a few weeks, I'm going to pull a frame of capped brood or a shake of bees or something out of there and give it to a colony that needs it. And when I say needs it, I'm not giving this to some sick, runty colony that doesn't want to build up. I've done that in the past. I don't do it anymore. I'm tired of that. Don't waste good bees on sick bees or a bad queen. You're wasting it. If the colony's making good efforts, if there's a good brood pattern, they're just maybe 3 or 4 weeks behind, that's the perfect colony to give these frames or so of maybe 2 frames, one from this colony, one from that one, beef them up. Now it's into a honey production state. It really takes some experience here, but knowing your flows, it's a little easier for me because my main source of income is not honey. It's like, nukes, queens, honey, so I would rather produce 80 pounds of honey and pull them back too far than to have produced, 120 pounds of that colony and maybe lost a swarm with that. Because that swarm's easily the size of a nuke's worth 180, 175 bucks. And so did you really come out ahead there with that extra bit of honey? It's debatable. I hate losing swarms. I'd rather cut them back. So it takes a little bit of trial and error, but that's kind of the best way I can do it. Ian might know a little bit more about that. Speaking of ProSweet, you said in your pollen sub video you're going to come out with a homemade product similar to that. Did it ever come to fruition, or maybe I missed it somewhere? Yeah, Lucas, I do have a video. Some people like it and some don't, where you invert sugar on your stovetop, and it takes a little bit of work, and you've got to invert it. It's kind of similar to what bees do to nectar. You can get it a little bit dark, and some people freak out about that because of the potential HMFs that can be created from heating things a little bit too much. I'm just careful with it. I use it in pollen patties. I've never seen any issues with it. I do have a video on how you can make that in the house, but some people are scared that that's going to kill their bees, and so whatever. When is the next conference? The next conference is January 7th and 8th of 2022. And if nothing changes, Ian Stepler, Bob Benny, myself, Rick Sutton, and we're going to have some other professionals. All of these guys are professional beekeepers. And I'm on the low end for sure. But these guys are just elite beekeepers. And the best part about these guys is they're personable. When they get off that stage, you can talk to them and they'll answer your questions. I mean, the last conference we had, it was my dream conference. I was really happy with it. It was just such a personable experience, and there was a lot of people getting their questions answered. We had 2 round tables where people wrote down questions, and Bob Benny and Kent Williams and myself answered them. And Ian had a wonderful presentation virtually, and we had Randy Oliver virtually this year. So we're going to have our number one goal is getting the best information to you that'll actually translate into your hives. It's not PhD nonsense that goes so far over your head. You're like, how can I apply this? Sorry, any PhDs out there. I don't mean it personally. But seriously, some PhDs speak over everybody, and it's useless. It doesn't matter if you're a genius. You got to be able to actually make a difference. And these beekeepers can make big differences. I know they've made big differences in my operation. Let's see. Hey, Christopher. So Christopher says, oh, thanks, Christopher. I use Kamon's inverted syrup recipe, and it is awesome. And again, it's quite a bit of work. If you're needing a small amount to make pollen patties, because that's a problem. There's a Michael Palmer recipe that I have a video on, and it does work. And Michael Palmer uses it. So it's using sugar syrup, like a really thick 2-to-1 or a little bit thicker than that. The problem is when it's still in that sucrose form where it hasn't been inverted, it has a drying effect. It dries out. So you end up, if it gets enough oxygen and air into the patty over time, they don't eat it fast. It gets like a Pop-Tart texture on the outside and eventually turns into a hard brick. As long as the bees are hungry for it and you don't apply too much, it works out pretty good. And it also doesn't last as long because it'll spoil a little bit over time. If you stick it in the freezer, it'll probably last longer, but it's probably going to mess with it. It's a little bit runnier and it's not as nice, but it does work. And I used that for a couple years. Michael Palmer's recipe is pretty good. So we've got a video on that. You guys can look at our playlists so you can find things easier. The pollen patty playlist, queen rearing playlist. The syrup, though, whenever you're using Pro Sweet, or you can even use honey if you're willing to do that. You can use high fructose corn syrup, or you can use this inverted syrup in the videos, and it's hygroscopic. It actually absorbs moisture, which is ideal for pollen patties so they don't dry out. Hey, Earl, I'm telling you what, we will announce it on YouTube and Facebook. You guys follow me on there. If you do Facebook, if not, just wait, you'll hear about it on YouTube for sure. And we're going to also, when our website's up, I'll let you all know. That's how we're going to take the information for the conference through the website. It'll just be much easier for everybody. And it's going to fill up fast. That's all I can say. I'm hoping we don't have half capacity restrictions in January of next year. And that way we'll be able to have 500 people. But we maxed it out this last year. And maxed it to the half capacity they allowed us to have. And it went fast. Kamon, do you blend your honey? If so, any advice? Hey, Chris, I don't separate any of my flows out. We pull the honey supers and we extract it. And that's all we do. As far as anything fancy, I don't have any advice for you. Bob Benny knows probably more about that than anybody. So he'd be the person to ask. Hey, Hooterville honeybees. In the video that I had today, we actually did that plastic dome thingy. And that Kloss Hive dome, it seems to be working. The bees are dry. I'm not seeing condensation drip down. I have seen condensation on it. Actually, the worst thing that I've seen about it is that the condensation does go to the outside, and that if you don't have your boxes protected well with paint or wax dip or something, that moisture from the condensation gets between the plastic and the top lip of the box and sits there for a while, and it could rot your box. But yeah, I don't think that's a big problem. And the bees look great. And, I'm not saying everyone needs to go get one of these. I'm totally not going to be putting these in all of my hives. But I do think they're really cool to observe bees. I can watch them eating the pollen patties. I can throw a sugar brick underneath it. It's neat to be able to show beekeepers if you're wanting to show them a thing or two without getting into the hive. So, I'd say it's a good thing. But is it a great thing? Is it a practical thing? Probably not. Hey, Don, I am trying so hard. Oh, Ian's like 500 people. Hey, come on, Ian, man. They all love you for the most part, except those, crazy anti-Canadian people, but there's not that many of them in the world. You can handle it. No, seriously. I don't know what your problem is, man. People love you. I mean, I'll be there right with you. And Laurel, how about I have Laurel hang out with you the whole time? How's that? Laurel's going, nope, not going to do it. Come on, Laurel. They actually probably make it worse because they'd all actually be coming to talk to Laurel like they did this last year. But no, you're going to be awesome, man. Laurel's good in person. When put under pressure, she is awesome. She's good. Let's see here. Boy, I've missed some stuff. Oh, Kamon, can you get Michael Palmer to speak next year? I have been in contact with Michael, and he says as long as the restrictions and thing with COVID are, Michael's the great guy, but he's up in age a little bit, and I think his wife and him have some health problems, and so it's a major concern to him, and should be. Just he's already got some pre-existing issues. So he said if things are cleared up, he would enjoy to do something like that. So if all possible, we at some point are going to have Michael Palmer there because he's one of my favorites. All right. Yeah, Mike Berry, that is some heavy hitters at the conference. I'm just like the bat boy at this event. Anti-Canadian people. I just I've never met an anti-Canadian person myself. I'm sure they're out there. There's somebody out there for everything. I mean, goodness, people believe that the Earth is flat for Pete's sake. I surely none of my subscribers believe the Earth is flat. Well, maybe they're not subscribers anymore. But anyways, hey John, I don't know what NZ stands for, but I'm thinking maybe New Zealand. So if that's where you're from, hey, we really appreciate you watching our videos from over there. One of my biggest dreams has always been to come over there and see the gorgeous scenery, but also to see the Lord of the Rings set that they have over there. I'm the little Hobbit town. I hope they still have that because what'd you say? She's like, oh, their little home's just built for you. I'm telling you what, if it wasn't for my wife, my ego would be uncontrollable, but she definitely keeps it in check. But yeah, I'd love to see the Lord of the Rings stuff over there. Hey, Chris, hate to break it to you, buddy, but Santa Claus is a myth. Kamon, do you ever come to Canada? I have never been to Canada. Laurel has many, many years ago before we got married. Totally one of these days, if at all possible, I'm going to go up there and bug Ian in person. And but I'm not doing it in winter if I can help it. I can't handle it. The snow's probably over my head, literally. When I had a question at the conference, I asked Laurel, Chip Sleeper, and what do you consider up in age? Nice question. So older than me. So Ian's up in age. I thought 32 was up in age not too long ago. So, but as my grandpa once said, you either get old or you get dead. Those are your two options. He was a smart guy too. Funny. Okay. Any tips for someone wanting to get into beekeeping? So, Ty's Mustang, I've got some for you. Actually, we are working on a pretty comprehensive video right now. Man, it's going to be the hardest video that I've ever done, but I'm trying to make sure we do a good job. And it's going to be literally addressing everything from start to finish on what you need to get started and to keep going. As far as tips, the main thing is educate yourself, learn. There's a lot to this. This isn't like raising chickens or cows, but there's a lot to that too. And my biggest hurdle as a young beekeeper or new beekeeper was just I saw so much bad information. And then some of it wasn't necessarily bad, but it put my mind in a box. You can't get into a hive unless it's this temperature. You can't do this. There's a lot of people telling me I can't feed pollen patties in Tennessee. Now I feed thousands of pounds of them, but I have to do them right. It's just getting education and learn from those who are successful. And if you're not sure they're successful, then be careful. There's guys on the internet on YouTube, and there's a couple of them, and they're talking about how they're making all these packages to sell. And whenever you watch their videos, all you see is like 5-frame nukes. A 5-frame nuke will not make a package, folks. It won't, not even close. And if you did try to, there'd be nothing left in that hive. And where's that brood going? There's some, you have to be careful. But we're going to have a video literally from the most basic and working our ways up on fundamental information. But great queens, dead mites, good nutrition. Splitting bees is healthy for your operation. It's also healthy for the bees. Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, splitting the bees and having young queens is good. That's what nature is always trying to do. Every spring, a healthy colony wants to reproduce. The only difference, people think that beekeeping is not natural. Good beekeepers copy nature as much as they can. Pretty much that's exactly what they do. But the only thing they copy is the benevolent good side of nature. They're not doing the bad stuff. Nature, like this week, it dropped half the limbs in my yard off the maple trees. My bees would have really liked that pollen. Didn't get it. And it froze a lot of the rest of the stuff off. Just, that's going to set the bees back a little bit. That happens. We're splitting the difference between a swarm reproducing and what I split is the thing is I give them a perfect cavity or a great cavity anyways. It's dry, it's maintained. If the weather's not benevolent, I give them feed. If something's wrong, I take care of it. Only 1 in 6 swarms on average survive in nature. 5 out of 6 of my splits make it. So great queens, dead mites, good nutrition, split your bees, keep them young. Even if you don't need extra hives, if you want to have 3 hives, have 3 big hives and 2 nukes. Bees are dynamic. They're going to go forwards and they're going to go backwards. Always have insurance colonies if you want to be sustainable. KR, do you wax dip for other people? I don't, but I'm talking to a guy who's looking into doing that in central Tennessee. And I'm hoping that he actually does it for people. I don't have the time, but I think there's good opportunities out there for people who that will do that for club members and other beekeepers. Let's see here. Someone make 2 memes, one for Ian. Look for and promote excellence. I think maybe it's brilliance or maybe it is excellence. I think it's brilliance. So, and Kamon's, there's too much bad information out there. There is a lot of bad information out there. Um, a lot of these hobby books are keeping people at hobby levels, and some of the information is not all bad. Like I said, it just keeps you limited. It puts you in a box. And then some of those hobby beekeeping books have incorrect and bad information. So one of the cheapest books out there that you can buy, that's one of the most fundamental nut and bolts books that I recommend is this one right here. I think it's $8 at Kelly's. It's How to Keep Bees and Sell Honey. If you're wanting to just be a hobby beekeeper or you're wanting to be have a small business with bees or even a big business, this is a great book. It's cheap. I know a lot of people don't like to read, but if you're going to read a book, this is a good one. Nuts and bolts stuff. And it was written by a professional. It was actually written by the guy that started Kelly's Beekeeping back in their heyday. Great book. All right, Sugar Shane. Need a fence to keep all that flat, cold air north of Ian. Hey, I'm going to put that $5 towards a fence to keep those Canadian breezes off of my property. But no, seriously, man, I really do appreciate you very much. And, Laurel said, what if it's a girl? Well, then I apologize and thank you, ma'am. Well, some women don't like to be called that either. Man, it's just so hard to get everything right. I just shut up now. No, seriously, we appreciate you. I'm always politically incorrect these days, it seems. It's impossible not to be these days. What's worse, mites or beetles? If you could stick them in comparison to one another, beetles would be like nothing, like literally nothing. And the mites would be like the size of the sun in difference. Mites are so rough on bees. Beetles are a problem. They are, but there are ways to keep them low. Strong colonies really beat up on beetles, and bees are getting more resistant to small hive beetles. They're bullying them more. There's a big difference in what I've seen over the last 17 years. Bees are a lot more tenacious towards going after those beetles. It's still not perfect. I actually pulled some patties today up a little bit, and I had some small hive beetle larvae in some of them in February. So there's still a little bit of an issue, but the mites, man, they are the number one problem. If someone said you can take all of the honeybee maladies out there in the world and get rid of that besides the mite, or you could just get rid of the mite and keep all the rest of them, what would you do? I would get rid of the Varroa mite without a second thought. That's how big of a difference they would make. The 90% of the people that lost bees this year lost them over Varroa related problems. There's other things that can compound on top of that, but mites are a big problem. Where does the queen poop? She just poops whenever she feels like it in the hive. They just take she has attendant bees that take care of any fecal matter for her. She's too busy. She's got to keep those eggs going. Yeah, Walter T. Kelly, I wish I could have met him. I think he would have been quite an interesting person to talk to. And I mean, just think of it though. He wrote a book like that was really good, nuts and bolts information, started a successful beekeeping company, and also was a successful beekeeper. That's awesome. This book's old, but it doesn't matter. Bees haven't changed that much. We've got a couple new pests, but fundamental information translates. That's why Ian's information in Canada is so good. Bob's down in Georgia is good. My buddy in Hawaii is a good beekeeper. Totally different locations, so there's some differences, but the fundamentals are always the same. When do you rotate your boxes, or do you? Dave, it really depends. I have some colonies that don't need rotations near as much. It's interesting. I find it a really attractive quality when I see a queen that not only is laying in the top box, but she's dropping down and laying in a few of the frames below. And then, eventually I'll drop that down to a single brood management system. But some bees, that queen gets stuck in that top box, and there's plenty of bees, but they just will not, the queen won't drop down below. And then I rotate it. If they have that top box completely full and there's more bees than will occupy the space of the top box, I'll rotate that thing in a heartbeat in March, April, whenever. So I kind of take it on a per colony basis, but I don't just rotate brood chambers at certain times in the years just to say that I've done it or to feel better about it. I really think that's more of an individual colony issue, and more I'm going to single brood management on all honey production colonies, so I don't have doubles very long. I find that I really enjoy that. And by the way, we have another sponsor for our experimental yard. One of them is Premier Foundation. And I'm excited about this foundation because it has up to almost 10% more cells per frame than your man lake frames. And so that could be like almost 6,000 cells in one brood chamber. That's huge for single hive management or any management. That gives the queen more space to lay. And what they've done is they've made the cell walls thinner and more like natural beeswax cell diameter. So I'm really excited to try that out. They say the bees like to draw it faster as well. So Premier Foundation, it's made in the USA. It's not injected molded like the other stuff you see. And they donated all the foundations we needed for our experimental yard. So I'd like to say thank you to them. Also, Hillco beekeeping supply. So you can go to hillco.com or whatever it is. They're up in Illinois, and they supplied all of the woodenware for the wooden side of the experimental yard. So we really appreciate them. It's USA made frames and boxes, and it's not man lake quality. It's nicer stuff. I'm excited to show you guys what it's going to look like. And I've talked to the owner, and they seem very personable, and the quality service actually exists, I think, at this company. So maybe say hello to them if you need some stuff. Hello from Southern Oklahoma. When do you typically do your first Varroa treatment coming out of winter? Hey, Tiffany. So how I run my treatments is I shouldn't have to treat right now because I did 2 rounds of oxalic acid vapor in December, when typically my bees in Tennessee are going to be almost broodless. It should be broodless, especially now that I've gone more to carnies. They are broodless. Italians can be a little bad about keeping some brood in there, but that's one of the reasons why we do 2 treatments. And they should be really low on mites. And then I won't treat again till June when I pull honey supers. But as soon as we pull them, we treat the same week, as soon as those supers are off. And then we'll treat again in August. So that's our Varroa strategy. Some people do it differently, and some people do treat pre-spring. So there's definitely different ways to do it. If you need to treat for Varroa mites, get to them before the honey flow gets around. They'll produce more honey, more bees, and obviously they'll survive. All right, we got someone here from Tasmania, Australia. Woohoo! Another place I'd like to visit. Hey, come on, Byron. You need to ask those kind of questions like, where does a queen bee poop? I mean, ask me one like where drones poop or something like that. Come on, buddy. Get some weird questions in here, but it's all good questions. It's just honestly, I've never thought about that before. Jason C, that's all I use is Premier. And what I thought when I heard about Premier Foundation for the first time, I haven't used it yet, but I'm thinking, okay, we've got Right Cell, we've got we got all these Pureco, Acorn, we got all these other foundations. So what's another one going to do? Whoop-de-doo, another foundation on the market. Do we really need it? But when I found out that they have more cells than the competitors, and that the cell walls are thinner and able to mimic better what the bees would naturally draw in a foundationless environment, that really intrigued me. I'm excited to use them. I also really appreciate the fact that they donated that to our experimental yard. So it'll be interesting to try over 1,000 foundations out and see how well they draw them. Let's see here. KR, what do you use for treatments in June? Apivar or something else? I usually rotate them out. Apivar is what I have been using, and then Thymol in the form of Apiguard. However, Apivar, and it's not just me, a lot of people have been having issues with it. It's not consistent. They're not doing their quality control. It's supposed to have a certain concentration of active ingredient. And there are beekeepers with 2,000 plus hives who have been using it for many years who are dropping it because it's not knocking the mites back like it's supposed to. One of the advantages of Apivar is when it works right, it drops the mites back to a very low number, works well, and the bees hardly see any effect at all to brood production. So the bees keep building. However, my experiments and other beekeepers that I would respect as well are leaning more towards Apivar's lack of effective knockback on mites. And so that's one of the reasons we're doing this experimental yard. There's several tests that we're going to be doing. And by the way, everyone, we're going to be doing a poll in the near future. If you want to leave some things right here, that'd be fine too. But we're going to be doing a poll on the wooden side of the experimental yard on what type of treatments you want to see on these wooden hives. We're going to do some that are wax dipped, a small portion. We're going to do some that are painted really good. So that's pretty generic right there. But we're going to have those as kind of like the the control group, if you will. And then we're going to have some that have like eco wood treatment, maybe linseed oil, and maybe another group or two. What are things that you would like to see some wooden boxes protected with that maybe you've thought that would be interesting to try, but I don't really want to risk it? This is an experimental yard, so we're willing to try that stuff and see if they protect our boxes well. And if there's some natural coatings out there that'll do a good job for our boxes. So if you have any suggestions for that, definitely leave those, and we will be doing a poll and finding out what to do with that. But the main reason we're doing this experimental yard is that the insulated Appa hives versus the wooden ones. But the primary goal is what natural treatments are going to keep our mites low and work effectively on a consistent basis. It's a tall order. I think we're going to have to be creative and really keep some diligent data on this. I've got some people willing to help me, so I'm excited about that. But we've got to get these answers because I don't like synthetics like Apivar anyways. And now that they're not working very good, this is as good of excuse as ever to get away from using that. We just got to find what will make these other products give us 90% kills. That's the main thing. We've got to get those 90% kills on Varroa mites. If we can figure that out, my goal is to move away eventually into this test yard and buying hygienic bees and trying out more resistant to Varroa strains and seeing if those will actually yield consistent or good results. 1.5. All righty. Merry Christmas 2.0. Tips for drawing out foundation. Okay. Obviously, you know this. Big, strong hives are good. Thin syrup is better. Bob Benning has some great information on drawing out combs. And what you want to do is mimic that nectar flow. Nectar does not come in as thick as 1-to-1. 1-to-1 is very thick compared to most nectars. So we want to have actually thin syrup. So say 3/4 as opposed to 1-to-1 of sugar. So 0.75 pounds of sugar, so 3/4 of a pound of sugar to 1 pound of water. This would be wonderful for drying out foundation. Obviously, if they need a lot of bulk feed because they're low, you want to go thicker than that. But what you're doing there is you're still stimulating them, actually stimulating them more than a thicker feed to make wax scales, but you're not plugging out your colony because it evaporates down so much and dehydrates down, so to speak. You're not plugging the brood nest when it doesn't need to be. So I would recommend that. A good wax coat is important, and uh, that's really the two things. I've used all kinds of foundations, literally every one that I'm aware of besides Premier, and I'm fixing to do that. And they all have worked for me as long as they have a good wax coat, the bees are ready to draw, and they have the nectar incoming. Wax foundation, um, same requirements for it too. I really haven't found any significant difference between using wax foundation or plastic foundation, honestly. And some people say one works better than the other. I haven't found that to be the case for myself. All right. Thank you so much, Tiffany Burke, for coming on, and the donation. Thank you very, very much. And if you have any more questions, make sure to leave them. Let's see here. And, some people, yeah, go a little bit thinner than that. But Bob Benny has some great videos on feeding bees. I don't recommend people lightly. And Bob, I would recommend all day long. Ian's the same way. I really like Frederick Dunn. There's several other beekeepers, and some of them are on here I recommend as well. But, man, if you're wanting to learn more about feeding, Bob is a great resource. And he's going to be at our conference, too. He was this year, and man, what a great person. Best advice for helping a hive infested with wax moths. My friend hive is riddled, so we're going over the hives weekly, taking out cocoons. Reduce the space. Wax moths are not a problem unless the bees are weak. They're more like vultures. When an animal like a calf is weak, sometimes they'll get on that, or if they're dead, they'll come in afterwards. But wax moths should not be a problem if the bees are healthy. Something else has dropped the population this low. So really the best thing is if they're covering 3 combs of bee coverage or 2 combs, reduce them down to basically only what they can cover. Give them a little bit of feed if they can take it. But if wax moths are an issue for this colony, they're in dire straits. Because wax moths are really a very, very weak pest. Have you ever used mineral oil to treat for mites? I have not, and there's, from what I understand, no scientific proof that it could work. The only thing that makes me think that it could help a little bit, and when people see mite drop after that stuff, is because it's irritating the bees. And whenever you do anything, whether you could throw wheat dust in there, or people used to use powdered sugar. Whenever you're doing that, you are aggravating the bees and getting stuff on them. This causes them to engage in hygienic behavior. And so what you're getting is a mass amount of bees engaging in hygienic behavior, and they're going to knock some mites off, and they're going to fall down and die. Are you achieving a high rate of kill? I seriously doubt it. But I really don't. I'm not a proponent of mineral oil treatment at all. So can you give me some water? Have you heard of other beekeepers having problems with queens last year? I have some issues with queens every year, and if I buy queens from commercial operations, I have queens every year that I do that. Queens are produced in mass, and the quality is not the number one for most of these suppliers. It's quantity, and I encourage you all to get into queen rearing if you possibly can, or encourage somebody that's either your bee buddy or at a club to engage in it. Raise queen cells. Bob, Benny, and I are going to be testing 2-day queen cells this coming year. It's only 2 days, and maybe you can start raising some queens. I think it'll be a lot easier for people to do that and stuff like that. Let's see. Ooh, that's what I needed. Frank's Bees, powder coat hives. What do you mean powder coat? What are you talking about? Laurel's looking at me like I'm an idiot again. Oh, is it? Well, Laurel said that could work, so I'll talk to somebody who knows. I've never seen it done on a hive or anything. All right, all right. So, okay, where were we? Laurel always throws me off track. I'm like the train's chugging down the track, and then Laurel derails. Yeah, she's like, "Well, you didn't know what powder coat was, and you asked me. I can't help it if you don't know." Ah, man, lost my train of thought. All right, 2-day queen cells work great. Tried that last year, 97% take. That's awesome, awesome, Christopher Palmer. Um, I'm even thinking if we can get 75% take, that's still awesome because you can raise them so fast and turn them around. And I just think if we can get a guy at a local club or a gal that will set up these 5-frame starter colonies, and every 2 days you go in there and you can pull out 32-day cells, 42-day cells. So, in a week, you could produce over 100 of these. You could sell them to your local club members for, goodness, even just $3. And you got to get a system down to where you're actually getting them good quality stuff into their hives and it's still viable. But I see opportunity there for people, and I think it'd be good for both parties. Powder coating is done using magnetic dust and heat to cook it. Not sure it would work. Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that would work. I don't know much about that. I think my dad worked at a place one time. He was a programmer for machines that did that. So Landon Nelson, what is a 2-day queen cell? So I'm going to break this down real quick. So basically, when you graft a larvae into a queen cup, if you haven't seen how to do that, I've got some cool videos on how to do that with the 5-frame nuke successfully in our playlist. But you graft them in there, you come back 2 days later, and if there's plenty of bees and nutrition in there, they're going to take those larvae and they're going to just fill that JZBZ cup, which is what we use to graft into. It's a mimic of a queen's cup, and they fill that completely full of royal jelly. So in those first 2 days, they get the bulk majority of all the food that they're going to need for their development. And then you take them out and you have mating nukes ready for them, and you put that 2-day cell. I mean, it's only going to have about that much wax on the cup, so it's still got 4 more days before they actually draw it out like a queen cell all the way and cap it on day 6. You just take that 2-day cell, though, and you stick it in a nucleus colony that was split the morning before. So they're desperate for a queen. It could have been split the day before. It needs to have some brood in there, and it needs to definitely have nurse bees. So I'm looking at least 2 frames of bees. That's what I like to see, about 2 frames of bees of coverage, 1 frame of brood, 1 frame of food, and that's enough bees to take care of that 2-day cell. Those nurse bees that are in that little mating nuke are going to finish drawing that cell out, and they don't have to do a ton of work because all of that royal jelly is already filled up in that cup from the starter. But it only took 2 days to do that. And now, since the starter's empty, we graft again. 2 days later, I can get probably 40 cells in every 2 days with that method out of a 5-frame nuke. I mean, that's 80 in 4 days. Do the math. And beekeepers are reporting, I believe this started in Europe, that they're getting good percentages of takes, letting the mating nuke draw and finish that out. And it's working really good for them. And the thing of it is, even if the mating nuke raises some of its own queens from some of the brood that was put in there, this cell's a little bit ahead of those, and it's going to emerge from that cell. The virgin queen's going to go around, sting all the rest of those queens. It's kind of like a walk away split, except way better. In your test yard, could you do hygienic with no chemicals to see mite numbers and compare? Hey, Mike, I am totally planning on doing that in the future. Right now, my focus is just trying to eliminate mites on a consistent basis so people can keep their bees consistently alive as much as I possibly can help with that. And if we can get that conquered pretty good, then we are totally moving into that realm. And I'm not sold that we're going to get immune bees, but can we get some better bees? Sure. And to what extent? Hope I'm wrong. I hope one of these days we're all treatment free and that we can still make 100-pound honey crops and the bees are gentle and all that stuff. But it's a very tall order. But we definitely have to keep pushing the envelope or we're falling behind. So that is a goal in the future. Hey, David from Brisbane, Australia. Thanks, mate. I really appreciate you. Man, I can't even say mate right. I can't say y'all right. I can't say anything. I just don't belong anywhere, do I? Laurel's like, you just don't have much of an accent. Nobody loves me. Let's see. There's incubators for queen rearing. Yes, there is. We use them. Bob Benny uses them. Hey, Bruce, he's back on. Hey, I didn't see Bruce. Did you guys get all that wax dipping done? Did you do a video on that? Ah, P Mac, do you recommend an incubator for queen rearing? You know, I've got one, and it does a pretty good job. I think for the money, there might be some better ones out there. Bob Benny has a video on a incubator that I'm going to try out this year, and if Bob uses it for his professional operation, I would bet a pretty good bit of money that's going to work out good. From what I remember, it was about $130-$150 somewhere in that range, but it seems to be working really good for him. So I would look at that video on Bob's queen rearing and check that incubator out. Hey, David Fetty. I don't have any polystyrene hives in the test yard. Appa was willing to make a sizable donation. We did pay for a bit of the Appa hives for the test yard, and that's where you all have been donating tonight. Several of you have, and so many of you, like Don and Landon and so I apologize. I can't remember everybody. Byron, Brian, and there's so many people. I recognize your names. You've done so much for this experimental yard, and it's just been amazing because, like I've said before, this yard is literally, by the time we start from day one, is going to have about $16,800 into it. That's a lot, and there's no way I could have made that happen by myself. So I'm really excited, but Appa was more willing to do that. And I didn't really know a whole lot of people in the polystyrene. Another thing I love about the Appa hives, Laurel, can you go get that bottom board? I love their pollen traps, and I love that it has a screen bottom on it. It's tougher than the polystyrene. It's more expensive, but you get a lot more gadgets. And I love the pollen trap. They have a pollen trap board that's $55. It's also a bottom board, screen bottom board, a mite tray. Some people are using it for small hive beetles, and it's food grade plastic. It's not going to rot. If you're wanting the pollen trap, I think it's the best way to go. Definitely for the price, and you get more out of it. You don't have to take it off. So a lot of these pollen traps, you have to take them off at the end of the year. Anyways, and I'm not getting any kickback from Appa to say that. I personally like it. Hey, Stephen Mack, thank you so much for the $20 donation. We really appreciate you very much and look forward to producing those test yard videos that I hope that will help us all. If you have a question, please leave it. Landon Nelson, on a 2-day queen cell, wouldn't you be pushing the limits on having laying workers in the queen mating nukes by the time you find out for sure that one of your queens did not return? Or am I doing the math wrong? Thanks. If she did not come back, and that's why we have things timed. When I drop that 2-day queen cell, when I drop a ripe cell, I'm coming back in 15 to 16 days. A ripe cell would be day 10. So we're dropping a 2-day cell. I'm going to add 8 days to that. So we're probably looking at coming back 24 days later. So yes, we're going to come back at that point, and if there's no queen, then we need to take action. That's where we would combine those bees back. I'm not going to drop another queen cell in there and try to get another round. Some people will do that. You could, when that happens in my queen rearing operation, if the queen doesn't come back, we go to a powerful colony that the queen did come back. We pull a frame of brood from there, put it in the one that didn't come back, and swap frames. This keeps the bees young. It keeps the pheromones are in there that keeps them from going laying worker. Drop another cell. But yes, you're not too far away from laying workers if that queen doesn't come back in that situation. You still have a little bit of time left, but not a whole lot. And that's why you have to do that bee math. All right, so I just got this in to do a video on them. You guys are going to get like a sneak peek. But Appa is fixing to do some giveaways for these, and they're also, I think, going to do a little bit of a discount on them as well. Right now they're $55, and I'm not a huge plastic fan. I mean, it's not like I'm just like everyone go plastic. But I am a big fan of beekeeping equipment that works good. And I tried some of these out. If they were going to be junky, I was going to tell you that, but I really love these things. And so this is another reason why we went with them in the experimental yard, is because they're tougher, and each one of those is equipped with a pollen trap. So I'm going to be able to trap pollen from like 26 more hives. That's going to be awesome. So that's going to make some cool videos. So let me get this up off of here. This is your entrance right here. You've seen that pollen Appa hives, and they work really good, but that's really nothing super special about it. You can take those off so you have more. I like these landing boards here. I think it really helps the colonies be able to blow that air in and vent. This also is made to go straight up. I don't have it engaged correctly yet because I installed it wrong, but that'll go up flat against your hive and actually seal the bees up, keep them ventilated, and it's easy to move hives in these things. The nice thing is there's a screen bottom board. This is the screen right here, so you can pull this tray when you're moving bees, shut this, and the bees have great ventilation even on those hot days. And then you see all these dots right here. This is the pollen trap. So what we're doing and how this pollen trap works is when we install this can slide out right here. It forces the bees to only go through this entrance up here. And then they have to, with their pollen baskets, work through these holes. And so it forces them to shuck it down into this tray below. And then you can collect it. There's a little bit more to it than this, and I'll definitely have more details on that. But when you're pollen trapping, a good strong double deep colony or stronger and a good pollen flow you can collect a pound from in a day. I was having some days where I was getting close to a pound on some colonies, and the weaker one was giving me a half pound a day. Beautiful, diverse pollens. It's awesome. And you can use that. Actually, what we're using some of it for is we take that and we make pollen patties for our queen rearing colonies. When we're raising queens, we want them to have the best nutrition. So it's not just Ultra Bee pollen sub made with corn and other things. This is actual pollen made pollen patties because we're raising queens in there. Also, I eat it in my yogurt and stuff, and it's very delicious. When you're not wanting to pollen trap, and I recommend 1 day on, 1 day off. That you got to harvest that pollen every day because it'll mold and go bad on you. We're going to pull this out when we're not collecting pollen, and now it's just a regular bottom board. So I think for $55 for a pollen trap, it's good. $55 for a bottom board, that's a good bit for a bottom board. But if you want the pollen trap and have all these IPMs for counting mites and catching small hive beetles, I think that's pretty cool. It's my favorite new gadget to try last year, for sure. Okay, got that put away. All right, back to questions. I did not see that. I haven't seen any of those yet. Hey, Easy Does It. Thanks so much. Hey, I really enjoy your channel. As a beginner, would you put out nuke swarm traps and let them go long just to rebuild resource frames? All right, let me read that again. I read it and didn't comprehend it all. Would you put out nuke swarm traps and let them go long just to rebuild resource frames? Maybe someone else can grasp that a little bit better than I did. Basically, if I'm putting out a nuke swarm trap, they're going to fill that out really quick. So what I would prefer is if I catch them in a nuke, I'm going to get them in a bigger box soon because they're probably going to outgrow that really fast. And I don't want them to swarm. I did. And as far as trying to use them to draw combs, totally. But the thing I've found with swarm trapping is my hot spots. I'll pull those swarm traps down as soon as possible, and I'll put a new bait hive up. And in the hot spots, I'll get 2 swarms in a year in that location. Many big hives do after swarms. So I can't remember if I did. I think I did. Stephen Mack, thanks again for your $20 donation. And Noah Gaynor, hey, thank you so much for the $50 donation. I'm excited about that experimental yard. And Current Pest Control, thank you once again for donating as well. Thanks everybody so much. Have you tried the Appa pollen feeder? I have not tried that. I have tried did just receive Appa May's new feeding system, and the thing is huge. So I'll be trying that out in the future when I get a chance. Yeah, Bruce's Bees. I have an Appa May hive, cool hive, but a little pricey while trying to grow. And that's, guys, that's why I'm not saying everyone get an Appa May hive. I think there's value in them, or I wouldn't even talk about them. But I'm not changing my whole operation to Appa May hives. I think they're cool. I love that I have some. Out of all their products, so the Pollen Trap, that is something, if you're into pollen trapping or wanting to, I think that's the best way to go about it. I've got a Sundance Pollen Trap. They're more expensive, and this does a lot more things. Let's see. Hey, Mike. Oh, you bought a couple at the conference. Yeah, I like talking to Korhan at Appa May. He's a really nice guy, and so was Hank there at the conference. I love seeing innovation. Not everybody's going to keep an Appa May. Not everybody's going to use pollen traps, but we need innovation. We need people developing new stuff. We've got to keep pushing the envelope. We've fallen behind. This industry is too far behind. How do you find swarm trap hotspots? Keep trying new locations. Or better yet, find a professional beekeeper and stick swarm traps fairly close to him, or a hobby beekeeper. I highly suspect that many swarm traps that are filled with good looking clusters come from beekeepers. So I'm actually fixing to do a swarm trap video. I'm going to try to set out quite a few this year just for the fun of it. But the main thing I'm wanting is to put them on the edge of some woods. I don't put them deep in the woods. They don't work very well like that. Dr. Tom Seeley has a lot of information on what is better, this height and at this, facing this direction and all that kind of stuff. I don't think that that's that big of a deal. I mean, if I think that Tom's right, it's not that. I just think that there's not a whole lot of options in a lot of places. People cut trees so small. There's not a lot of cavities, and even there's just not a lot of good locations. And especially if you're putting good things in there, like you're putting bits of comb, you're putting bits of propolis, you're putting maybe even some dead bees in there, because dead bees still have some hive smell on them and pheromones, little residues. And you're also, if possible, putting some lemongrass or swarm commander in there. And you're giving them these ideal smells. A lot of people think that some of these wild, bees and trees, oh, they've been there for 10 years, 20 years, all that stuff. They've probably died every other year. But colony can die out in winter and be occupied in Tennessee by March by a swarm, and they'll fix it right on up. And if it's a good cavity, they'll just use it over and over again. And those are that's the most attractive thing to catch swarms, is the closer it smells and looks like a good hive, the better chance you have of catching them. So good swarm trappers are mimicking hives, hive smells, hive diameter size, 30 liters or whatever it is, according to Tom Seeley's at 30 liters or 40. I can't remember. It's one of those, but I don't get caught up in putting it way up like he does. I find super good success putting it at shoulder height. Keep it simple. I catch them good at that. I have some that I sit on the ground. If I can't find anything better, I caught one. I had a 55-gallon drum at a farmer's, and I didn't have time to go find a tree. I just stuck it on a 55-gallon drum. I didn't catch anything the first year. Didn't even bait it the second year. This year it was packed with bees, and so it was great. What? Oh, okay. And so yeah. Lemongrass is great. A lot of people are saying Swarm Commander is better because it has special goodies in it that make it more attractive than lemongrass. Maybe it does. I have great success with lemongrass. I've used Swarm Commander too and had great success with that. So either way, the only difference is I can get lemongrass a lot cheaper. Shoulder height for you is pretty close to the ground. That was a low blow, Christopher. Laurel's just like, all of the blows for you are low, Kamon. Man. Just can't win for losing. Hey, John, just again with Premier Foundations, I think that it's pretty cool. For someone like myself who is looking at single brood management, I just think that having those extra few thousand cells per box is just massive. I think compared to right cell, it was almost 6,000 cells per deep if you had 10 frames in there, and that's big, especially if you're running a single hive management system or a single box brood chamber. Let's see. Let's see here. Christopher, that was mean. You know, I'm usually the first one to throw out the short jokes because being an ex truck driver, let me tell you, it was just a matter of time until they came out from the truck drivers. And they were jealous of my good looks, charm, and my work ethic, and the fact that I ain't synced to their level. So I went ahead and just pulled out the short jokes, and they really it aggravated them that they couldn't get to me, which is probably why they picked on me so much. But anyways, one of the things that they do is they laugh. I got a Prius. I got the thing for like $3,900. I get like 52 miles to the gallon in town. And they're like, oh my goodness, just when we couldn't think any less of you. And I'm like, hey, you're the one that's got a $50,000 vehicle and you can't hardly make the payments on it. This thing's paid with cash. Insurance is low. I'm saving all this money, all this stuff. And then the next time I'll roll in with Big Red or something like that. They're, what the heck is that? I'm like, well, this is how I compensate right here. They're like, what do you mean by that? Well, short guy, big truck. But actually, the reason I have to drive a Prius is because my truck gets about 6.97 miles to the gallon. So I have to drive the Prius to kind of make up for the gas chugging. Hey, P-Mac, thanks for coming to the conference. It was a blast. How is the world bee populations in general? They're actually pretty good here in the US. I don't know what the world's bee population is. And if we're talking general, just bees in general, it really depends on location and places where there's not heavy chemical usage and agriculture. And it's not just chemicals. I said that wrong. We get tied up in all these sprays and stuff. The sprays are actually a lot safer than what they used to be. There's a lot more regulations than there used to be. And no, it's not perfect. And I wish it'd be better. But we are in a better place than we have been in the past. What's really hurting the bees more than anything is the lack of habitat. There's not as much food out there for them, and there's not as much places to get a cavity. Or if you're a bumblebee, different size cavity, but habitat loss is the biggest thing. Sprays would be next. And a lot of it's tied to agriculture. I see all kinds of native bees here in Tennessee, but there's some parts of Tennessee they're not as common, typically agricultural areas. It's a catch-22 type of problem. But it's also, people building houses and mowing lawns and stuff like that. So it's not just the big farmers and stuff. It's a complicated issue, and we all have got to take some responsibility and focus on what we can individually do, because it's not something that you can create laws for and destroy freedoms. What we've got to do is, like a honeybee, just take care of our little realm of work. Honeybee doesn't do all the work. It just does like a drop of honey in its lifetime. But all that adds up to something great. And if we all did that little drop just within our own realm, we could make that nice surplus honey crop. Say what? Oh, Trevor? Oh, boy. What'd Trevor say? Laurel's giggling over here. The truckers cannot get to you. Why? Do they have trouble bending down that far? Oh, man. We'll see. This is what I tell everybody, and I'll get back onto the bee questions here in a second, I promise. But, I always said this to them because I was always the youngest in the group by far. And anybody that was my age never lasted long, because actually where I worked was unloading and real work, real hard work. And, young people have a hard time with that. And the old guys seem to be more likely to stick around, but they were really rough, like sailors. Truckers are modern day sailors. And anyways, so I tell them, guys, I can say whatever I want. I can tease you. I can do all this stuff. You can't get to me. And Like, what do you do? We think you're better than us? I'm like, no, no. And I don't think I'm necessarily smarter than you guys. I just, I just think a lot more. And they just sit there and like, what? Anyway, so long story short, I said, you know what? I can talk however I want. You guys can't do anything about it because I have to be only one of two things. I've either got to be the biggest and baddest man in the room, or I've got to be the fastest. And I said, you guys are so slow. I can say whatever I want. You can't catch me. And of course, nobody liked me, but whatever. You either love me or you hate me. And I probably just lost some subscribers over that too, but whatever. Oh, Don. Okay, where is it? Are you still happy with your wax ratio for dipping boxes, or would you adjust it a little? Getting ready to dip our first one. So I actually was talking to Bruce Bees about it. Oh, there he's talking about wax boxes himself. And yeah, I'm glad you like those wax dip boxes, Bruce. I truly love mine. As far as ratios, I was talking to Bruce about this the other day, and this is another part of beekeeping that's still really in the art phase, and there's very little science behind this. If someone knows any publications on wax dipping boxes, I would love to read it. There's different ratios. Some people don't even use microcrystalline; they use rosin instead, and there's different temperatures. There's guys I know that go into the 300s for 10 minutes or 300s for 6 hours. Some guys do 12 hours. Some guys do 240 for 15 minutes. It's all over the place in different ratios, 33%, 50% ratios. It's crazy. Nothing's set into stone. I have been very pleased with 50% paraffin and microcrystalline wax dip boxes. However, you might get just as good as results, or shoot, maybe better results with 30% microcrystalline and then 2 parts of paraffin. So I don't know. All I know is really what's been handed down from other beekeepers that know a little bit more than me, maybe, when it comes to this. It seems like everyone's just kind of making up their own thing. And if anybody really knows the best way, nobody's talking about it. But I'm totally up to learning more about wax dipping for sure. Christopher Palmer, we love you, Cayman. Well, I'm glad somebody does. Truck drivers don't. I have a fun time. I mean, and I was talking again to Frederick Dunn yesterday for a couple hours, and Frederick, I'm just so excited to meet him at our conference in January because talking to him over Zoom, just such a fun guy. He just got a great sense of humor. I don't know why more people can't be like that. We all have to be so uptight and just waiting for somebody to offend us. And the reality of it is, the your best buddy, your wife, whoever, someone eventually, they're all going to eventually tick you off. Let me know. Let me tell you, Laurel knows all about me making boneheaded decisions, and anyways. So we just all got to be a little bit more forgiving, and definitely got to be a lot more focus on the laughter. I love people that are just able to cut up and get on. And Fred is one of those guys. So it's going to be a blast. Yes, no reason to paint a wax dip box. Some guys are starting to. Some guys do that though. They do wax dip and then they'll do an oil-based paint over the top. And I got to see some of those in Hawaii, and they look pretty darn good. And it does seem like a little bit of overkill. I think some people just don't like the wax dip look, and also there's the UV protection side of it. Or if you're in a really hot area, as wax dip boxes get older, they fade and get darker. So if you're painting them white or a lighter color, it is going to help keep the boxes a little bit cooler. But, is it worth it? That kind of stuff. Again, we don't really have a lot of good answers on this stuff. All right. So Stephen Mack, I had a question earlier, 7 and 23, but also I didn't see that one, Steve, and I apologize. What about forced brood breaks for mite control, intentionally caged queens for 2 to 3 weeks right before spring, or is that just not enough? I think that is good enough for getting some better mite control. The problem is I wouldn't do it right before spring personally, because I want those bees for splits and honey production. Because if you do it right before spring, you have a good long honey flow, you're still going to probably get a pretty good flow at the early part, but then you're going to lose that brood for long term, or those bees for long term honey production. So It just depends on what you want. I do love brood breaks, and that's one thing we're going to be talking about and doing in this experimental yard so much. And it's what I've been doing for the last few years with my splits, and excuse me, I make my splits up to where both colonies can get almost a 100% brood break. It's not perfect. I do have a little bit of brood, just little small little bits in there, but it's hardly anything. Just a few cells, and a lot of times I don't miss at all, and it makes a big difference. Your treatments are much more effective, and it's a biological control um, on top of a treatment, and both put together, they're both made much better. And I think that's the answer to a lot of our problems. Hey Seth, yeah, Fred's a great guy. I really think a lot of Fred. But every time I say Fred, I always, you know, I didn't get to watch the new cartoons. I wasn't allowed to watch the cartoons in my age group. I was only allowed to watch the old reruns, Bugs Bunny, and all these politically incorrect things. And when I think of Fred, I always think of Barney saying Fred, and I don't know. I just every time, so I try to call him Frederick more, just because I don't think of the Flintstones. But he's hilarious. He had some great stories. Hey, Christopher Palmer, I'm talking about microcrystalline wax. So if you guys go to candlemaking.com and you look at product 1260 and 5775, or it's something like that. They only have a couple products, but they have microcrystalline and wax and paraffin. And the reason you want to use the microcrystalline with the paraffin is it is multi-chained on the atomic scale, and the paraffin is single chained. And the microcrystalline has also got a really high melting point, so it won't leach out of your boxes. And that multi-chained property with the microcrystalline keeps it in the boxes. If it's wax dipped correctly, once it dry, it goes into the wood. You can't like take your fingers and just scrape off tons of wax in the places where it's soaked in properly. Sometimes you get excess, but once you scrape that off, it's pretty dry and it's in that wood. It's a really good way of protecting your wooden boxes. Hey, Kamon, did you see the new device Fred Dunn had on a video? I didn't see his video on that, but we had talked about that when we were talking personally. And, I haven't really thought about it a whole lot. I'm interested to see him testing it out. And that's why it's awesome to have a lot of guys on YouTube that are really trying new stuff and are really genuine, because one person just can't do it. It's just, no way. But I'm anxious to see what his results are on that. William Brown, when is the conference this year, or is there going to be? When is the conference this year, or is there going to be one? Thanks. It's going to be January 7th and 8th. Bob Benny, Ian Stepler, Rick Sutton, myself, Randy McCaffrey, Dirt Rooster, Frederick Dunn, and there's going to be a couple other people there, and great vendors. We had great vendors this last year, and that was with restrictions. So I'm hoping there will be no restrictions this year. We can get past half capacity, and we can get people like Better Bee, licensed products, Premier, lots of people. And a lot of the vendors were giving some pretty good discounts and obviously delivering it for free. So that was, there were some cool things happening. One of the guys got a 20 frame date end extractor like what I have, and got 10%, got shipping, and got like these companies were giving like 10% off. And so like you get 10% off an extractor or something like that. Like $2,000 is $200 off. If you don't have to pay for shipping on top of that, which a lot of the extractors aren't eligible for free shipping, it really can add up to a good chunk of change. The conference is going to be in Lebanon, Tennessee. And it'll be, yes, January 7th and 8th. And we'll be posting that information. Laurel's working on our website, and it's going to be awesome. And the only speakers we have are people that are nice, personable, and are excellent, top-notch beekeepers. I'm going to be the worst one probably there. Let's see. You're not tall enough to be Barney. Sharon Lane, that was uncalled for. If I had blonde hair, I could be Barney Rubble. Oh, you'll really put your foot in your mouth this time, friend. Okay, so I don't do voices very good. But anyways, I loved watching all those old cartoons. That's probably why I'm as crazy and as zany as I am. Um, all right. Yeah, that wasp device, it was interesting. I don't really have a lot of wasp problems here. I'm interested to see if it would work on yellow jackets for people that have problems. Yeah, Trevor. Hey, if you're going to come to the USA, Tennessee's a great spot. I'm telling you what, man, we know how to have a good time. People are really friendly in this state overall. We've got our own share of idiots, but so does everybody. But compared to some of the states out there, like California, we do pretty good. No offense to anybody who's on here from California. I know there's a lot of people in the state, and there's some of my friends are from California, but we're just going off of generalizations here. So while we're at it, why don't we make fun of Ian Stepler from Canada? Let me see. Cayman, if you don't quit knocking yourself, you're going to shrink a little. It's kind of the way I do things. I'm sorry. Going to try Minwax water-based spar urethane brought to tent. Yeah, that might not. I haven't tried anything like that. Might try that. Let's see here. What? I did. It was a terrible impression. I'm sorry. It was a terrible impression of Barney, but no. What do I do? I don't have time to practice being Barney. At least it's not Barney 5. Let's see here. Yeah, Ian probably is sleeping or trying to thaw something else up there. Is there any new products for 2021 that excites you? There's a couple that are coming out that I can't talk about. I'm kind of, as far as stuff that I can talk about, uh nothing that's just like really grabbing me and just like, man, that's cool. That doesn't mean that there isn't, but I opened up like some of these Man Lake and Dating catalogs, and I'm really frustrated with some of these bigger companies. Not a whole lot of research and development going on in areas that I feel like are important. Um, Anyways, that's just my opinion. Let's see here. Do you use green drone frames? Okay, so I actually had a question on my YouTube channel on that earlier. So green drone frames. Bob Benny talks about these a lot. Bees are going to keep a certain amount of drones in the colony. Whether you have good worker combs or not doesn't matter. They will turn them into drone-sized cells if they feel like there's not enough. And so a lot of people just go ahead and put one or two green drone frames in the if you so you have 10 frames in a box, and so you'd have them at the you have the 10 in the one spot, so you have them at the 2 or the 9 spot, typically your green drone frames. And I wouldn't put two in one box, but you would stick them second from the wall. That's a good spot where bees typically like to put drones anyways. And that can keep them from wanting to raise as much drones and change those combs over in your other frame. So that's why some beekeepers use them. Some beekeepers, if they see there's a lot of drones in there and they want to use a little IPM management, they'll take them out and they'll freeze them after they've been capped, because Varroa prefers drone combs many times more than they do worker brood. It's natural for them to do so. So some people use that to cut the mites back a little bit. But guys like Bob, he's producing a lot of queens for himself and to sell. And so he needs plenty of drones out there of good quality. And so that's why they're used. It's not something that everybody needs to have necessarily, but they have their place. And I'm not, I've only have a handful, and you can just let the bees kind of pick their own if you'd like to do that instead. Can you wax dip hive bodies that are already painted? Totally. Now, if the paint has a spot sealed, obviously the wax is not going to get there. But anything that the paint does not have sealed, it will totally take that and seal it good. And the only other negative thing I would say about that, though, is there is a little layer of wax that is on top of that paint when you're done. And it actually, you can kind of peel it off a little bit. Um, and it's a little bit, it's not sticky, but it's a little gummy feeling, and dust can collect on it. So it doesn't look as pretty. But I do that all the time to my painted boxes because I'm not concerned about good looks as much as I am longevity. Let's see here. All right. Sorry, I had to take care of something. Can you please give me some advice on how to remove bees from an owl box? The bees have been there 2 years. It's getting into the high 30s at night still. Well, Linda, um, you can get a beekeeper to possibly do that for you. If you are a beekeeper, then I personally would recommend waiting till it's a little bit warmer if you're going to remove them out. Hopefully, there's some screws or something you can remove it. Have a smoker handy, suit, all that kind of stuff. If you're wanting to see how to cut things out of cavities, excuse me, watch 628 Dirt Rooster. I know it's a weird name. He's kind of a weird guy, but he's really nice and smart when it comes to cutouts. And he's a buddy of mine. His name's Randy McCaffrey, 628 Dirt Rooster channel. He's got tons of videos on cutting bees out of things like what you're talking about, floors and walls in people's houses. And he would be way more informative than I ever could be. I hate cutouts. I hate doing them. I hate them. It's a pain. All right. Hey, Kamon, how are your winter losses so far? I'm well below 10%. I would say probably, 5%. I think I'm going to maybe be somewhere between 5 and 8%. Worst case scenario, unless something crazy happens. I'm really excited with what I'm seeing. We really put a lot of work into our bees this year, managed the mites well, fed them and when they needed it, requeened them when they needed it. We worked on them harder than we ever have. And we made a lot of splits, and they're looking really good. And this hasn't been the easiest winter either, but the bees just went into winter in really good shape. And I'm excited. Definitely going to be under 10%. And not all. I'm not saying all 90% of those are just going to be champs producing big honey crops, but I think they're all going to be viable colonies. The big ones will be for honey, and the small ones will probably be for queen rearing and splitting to make up nukes or something like that. Yeah, JP the Bee Man has some cutout videos. I haven't ever watched a whole lot of those cutout videos. I'm just not really into that, and it's not that they're not good. I don't watch those a whole lot, and Randy, I had him at my conference, and then I started watching his stuff a little bit more, and but I'm sure JP is a great person to watch too. I've heard a lot of good things. So Ken says, I'm heading to my 4th year as a beekeeper. I like to change out my brood combs, brood frames. What is the best method for doing this in your opinion? Thanks. Ken, I really don't like to just do it all at once. It's a lot of work for the bees. What I would try to do is get your bees to draw out some foundations. Feed them a little bit if you have to. Right after the honey flow's done, pull the boxes off and feed a really light feed, less than 1-to-1. We're probably talking about, you know, 3/4 of a pound of sugar to 1 pound of water, a thin syrup, and just put on some foundations. Pull up a frame of brood of larvae, entice them up there, and feed them that, and get them to draw out those extra combs for you, and cycle out those frames as you're drawing new ones, and the queen's moving up and starting to lay into that second box. Preferably, I don't like to replace a whole deep box at a time, but it can be done. But how I replace my combs is by selling nukes, and that way I'm not selling people combs that are like 15 years old, but they're combs that still have probably 5 or so years left in them, easily. And that way it's keeping my combs young at the same time. But drawing comb is something every beekeeper, I think, should, if possible, actively engage in, whether you need them or not. It's just you can never have too many combs, in my opinion. It's one of those things. Love them. Have you used Bob's treatment of copper naphthate, mineral spirits, and raw linseed oil? I have not, Leroy. If Bob's using it, I bet $1,000 that there's a good reason for it. There's some research that I've read on it that copper naphthate becomes inert basically once it dries into the wood. And I'm not surprised. People sometimes get caught up on chemicals and all this stuff. Well, everything's a chemical. And bees need copper. It's very important for bees to have copper. And there's so many different forms of it. I mean, goodness, there's like 13 forms of calcium in a tomato. So, I mean, what might be toxic at one level might actually be beneficial at the other, is what I'm saying. So I'm not worried about it. I haven't tried it, but I do know other professionals that use it, and there's a good reason for it. It's a little bit of a pain to fool with, but I mean, these guys are saying they're getting a couple decades off of their boxes, and hey, talk about maximizing your money out of a piece of equipment. Evan, what do you think about pre-drawn synthetic wax comb? I have no problem with it. As far as I don't need it myself because I'm already kind of set up pretty well with my system. But if I was starting off brand new, I would definitely consider it. If my bees needed some drawn comb, I try a little bit of it out and see if it helped me. The main thing is Frederick Dunn and also Dansky's bees have done videos, and in the summertime, they're really bad about sagging if they are not wired. And I think you're talking about the Better comb from Better Bee. So just make sure that they're wired good. But they're seeing brood in there and all kinds of stuff. I wouldn't use them for honey production at all. And you definitely don't want to get that in your beeswax if you're selling beeswax. Let's see. Well, folks, I'm probably going to head off here. I told Laurel I'd be on here for 2 hours. I am fixing to change a lot of things. I do have some permacomb. Be worth it. This is my first year trying it. I'm going to run through a couple things here real quick, and then we're going to I might do a question or two if I see a good one that I really think needs to be addressed. But what's coming up? Well, if any of you guys know some brand new beekeepers that are needing some basic information, I'm not going to try to take away from the videos that we're already doing at all. The experimental yard's coming up. That's going to be number one. We have important videos on keeping bees successfully, but I feel like I have not been very good in the last year about addressing basic level information for brand new beekeepers or those who are thinking about getting into it. So I'm going to try to release about a dozen videos this year, about 20 minutes in length, that really break down nuts and bolts how to start beekeeping. So watch out for that if you need that. If not, if you know someone who's getting into it, we're going to really try to get them information to get them off and running. And we're also going to be doing that experimental yard soon. We're a little bit later than I'd like to be with the weather, but sometime in March, we'll be setting up the yard. Bees should be coming in April. There's going to be a lot going on. And of course, single brood management, talking about that, putting up a bunch of swarm traps. Be on the lookout. I'm fixing to sell a bunch of stuff. I say a bunch of stuff. I'm going to sell about 1,000 frames, I think, with foundation. I'm also going to sell, brand new. I'm going to sell some boxes, some wax dips, some without wax dipping. I'm going to sell a couple small pieces of extraction equipment I got for videos. That'll be on Facebook pretty soon, probably in the next week or two. I'll post it on YouTube as well. Oh, yeah, just lots of stuff going on. Definitely make sure if you have a good suggestion for protecting wood that's not commonly done, let me know about it. It could be in the experimental yard and we can see if it's a good, viable, natural wood preservative. So there's always a lot going on here. Keep asking questions, but if you don't get an answer from me, don't take it personal, please. I'm just literally bombarded constantly, and it's a wonderful thing. But I'm just one person, and Laurel refuses to talk to people because she's not a social butterfly. Anyways, I'm going to let you all go, I guess. And you all have a great rest of your Sunday and get ready for Monday because here it comes. Thanks, everybody, so much. We'll see you soon.